Hey, hello there, and welcome to Talking with Tony. I'm loving the new additions from the opening there. That's courtesy of Jake Barton, who's our producers in Newnan, Georgia tonight. We'd like to welcome a frequent guest to Talking with Tony, or one of our favorite. He was a college football coach, later on a high school football coach. He's been a coach in athletic career. He's worn a lot of different hats, but he's one of our favorite guests. Ken Kesselring, often known as Coach K in the Coweta County area, and part of that Coweta school system still now. Ken, thank you so much for taking time to talk with Tony.
Well, I'm excited. Football's starting, so hey, the world's come back to normal with football starting.
Football is starting, but I would be remiss if we didn't mention the Cincinnati Reds. Last time that you were on the show, and just for a tutorial for people who are new to Talking with Tony on YouTube, previously 13 previous seasons were on WOW, and you were a frequent guest, and we would talk about the Reds. And when you most recently visited a couple of months ago, 3 months ago or so, the Reds were doing spectacular. They've cooled off some, but Ken, there's still a possibility for the wild card. The division's a little out of reach, but you should have hope still for a wild card.
Hopefully they will. Haven't been able to follow them as much lately in the past month or so, but hopefully they will. At least make the wild card. Get into the playoffs, and who knows? Maybe someday the Big Red Machine will return.
When Joey Votto came back and he's hurt again, and it was just awesome to see him a part of that for a short period of time with all those young kids, because there's some real talent there with Benson and De La Cruz and Matt McClain. They've got something special going with Cincinnati. They build the pitching staff and all. And I don't know if you're going to get that 70s Big Red Machine again, but maybe like a World Series championship the year they beat Oakland. I think it was 1990 when they surprised the Oakland Athletics.
Right. They did in 1990. So who knows? Maybe they will. But it was good for Joe to be back for a while, and maybe someday he can be healthy for a full season again.
Yeah, and I'd like to see him into his career there. When you see the horseshoe there in the background on my screen, what thoughts come to mind? Is it Archie Griffin, or is it something else?
I always remember, back in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up in Ohio, just the fun of seeing Bo and Woody go at it. Back then there was only like 2 games on a Saturday on TV, and then, you'd always have the chill in the air, as Keith Jackson would say, there's a chill in the air, and you'd have Woody and Bo going at it, and people didn't realize they were really friends. Bo had coached for Woody, and played for Woody. So, they were good friends, but, that's what I just remember, those gray, cloudy days, watching that game when it was a special game. Of course, the Big Ten is not what used to be in terms of the teams anymore, but that was a special, for me, that was special back then.
Before we talk some specific games, Ken, can I just get your thoughts on the realignment? I think where I probably stand. The Rose Bowl meant so much to me growing up as a kid, the granddaddy of them all. And so often it was Ohio State or Michigan. And later on there were some, Wisconsin's. And I remember Chuck Long with Iowa going out there and generally playing Southern Cal or UCLA. But there was times where Washington or somebody else, was there. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is I most prominently remember Ohio State and Michigan going out there. And I most prominently remember UCLA or Southern California being the team representing the Pac-12 or Pac-10. And now you're telling me they're going to be in the Big Ten. I have a hard time accepting that. I know I'm old school, and I know I'm a bit of a purist and a bit of a traditional guy, but am I wrong here to have a problem with it?
No, and I have a big problem with it, and it's not necessarily because of football. It's because of the non-revenue sport. So now some volleyball player at Southern Cal has to travel to Rutgers in Maryland and go play Penn State. And, oh, by the way, keep your grades up. All those rules, it doesn't make sense. The universities can't really afford that. It's unfair to those sports where they have to play multiple weeks away. And it's a travesty. I understand the TV money is such a big deal, but they've really lost the purpose of the college athletics for the non-revenue sports, as I call them.
Rutgers has had a soccer program through the years. And so you're going to tell me that these kids that dream to go play soccer, say at Rutgers, they visualized having to go to Washington. They visualized having to go to some of the places that they're going to be asked to go to. And then I wonder, like, what do the parents do to be able to see them? Are they going to have these hub cities they call in Dallas, or how frequent would that work? Like what? We're talking. Yes, we understand for football, maybe basketball. There's so much more there to uncover. The tennis, the swimming. I mean, we could just name sports. Here all night. It just is. It's hard for me to stomach. It really is.
It really, and I agree, and that's where I think it's a huge mistake. And hopefully, somehow, some way, someone can come to their senses, or maybe do where you only have the football. Those schools are only in it for football, maybe basketball, and then go back to the Pac-10 for the volleyball, swimming, tennis, track and field.
However, when we look at the current Pac-10, or they call themselves the Pac-12, no conference got off to a more impressive start in football in week one, and they are the ones that are breaking it all up. We won't be able to hear the Bill Walton say the Conference of Champions anymore, like he has said so frequently. So hats off to the members for really showing out in their opening contest in week one, and not let that hold up. I've been doing something kind of fun. I think you'll appreciate this. Kind of have a rule that I don't wear jerseys except for at the house or on the show. And I'm going with Buckeyes here all fall. I started out week one with Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think is the best player in college football. And then I went to Ibuka, his running mate there, the wide receiver, Emeka Ibuka. Week three, I went to the defensive side with Jack Sawyer. Week four, I went back over to the offensive side with Travion Henderson. And today, one of the finest, most underrated linebackers, I've got the Tommy Eichenberg 35 on. I think he's one of the most underrated linebackers in college football. Now, a guy from Ohio can certainly appreciate the love affair that this Southerner has for those Buckeyes.
And that's rather interesting. They curious how all those jerseys are around, how the NIL money's getting distributed for all that. Next we'll have to have you get a lineman's number, though. Those poor guys don't quite get the NIL money that the rest of them do.
Does a defensive end count? Because week 7 is going to be Caden Curry, who's a backup defensive end, and Jack Sawyer can certainly play that spot too. Right. I don't have the offensive lineman, but then there's basically 4 new in Columbus right now. Also, I did do those websites say something like NCAA athlete jersey, so I'm hoping that they get a good percentage of that. I'm not a fan of name, image, and likeness, but if it's used for name, image, and likeness, I'm for it. If it's bogus name, image, and likeness, I'm not for it. If it's things like that, I think it actually works.
Yeah, that's what's interesting with stuff like that. Do the kids actually get that revenue from those jerseys and that? Does a defensive end count? I don't know. They're kind of glory guys. If you could take a 3 technique or nose guard, maybe those are linemen. But those ends, I don't call them linemen.
You coached, I believe, Ball State. I know you coached University of South Carolina, a couple other stops. You still have friends involved in the collegiate and NFL coaching, correct?
I have people I know now. A lot of them gotten older. I watched the other night as Sparky Woods, who was the head coach when I was at South Carolina. He's on Mac Brown's staff there. Saw him. And there's a few other guys around different schools. It's fun every once in a while to turn on TV and watch them still coaching, but a lot of them are starting to get a little old.
They are now. Your buddy Richie, that was the interim coach for the Raiders, did a great job a couple of seasons ago. And is it Green Bay he's with? Who is he with now?
Yeah, Rich is with Green Bay now. Rich Bisaccia is a great guy. Did a good job in a hard situation, and it's a shame that somehow that couldn't have continued. But Rich Bisaccia is a good coach.
Before we get into the games that I want to discuss with you, and by the way, I was 4-0 against the spread last week. You can't do any better than that. Well, there are 5 that I'll give the viewers tonight, but let's face it, I'm not going to go 5-0. I'll be good to go 2-3. But before we get to that part, Ken, you're deep in SEC country. Is this Georgia's conference to lose? Or there? I see other factors. I even see LSU, a resurgence from LSU, who didn't play well at all against Florida State. I don't think Alabama is just a given to win the West. And maybe Georgia's certainly the favorite there in the East. I don't have any qualms over that. But They
Right.
may get a push. They may get a test, a challenge at Tennessee.
I think they'll get a chance. I think Tennessee is a good ball club. And you never know. I know Georgia fans are screaming and shouting about what's the offense going to be and everything. But Tennessee's a good ball club. They'll be their competition um, in the um, in the East. The West. In my mind, is probably a little better conference from top to bottom. And I'm like you. I think LSU will do like they did last year. They'll get better as the season goes along. Alabama, of course, is strong, and you never know what's going to happen with Ole Miss and Mississippi State. They've been competitive, and I'm never going to count out Arkansas in terms of their physicality. I think they're a physical team that can present some problems to people, but I think the West is a little better division. So is it Georgia's? I think Georgia will win the East. Then we'll have to see how things pan out as it goes on. It's awful early to predict, and injuries play a big factor.
No. When Marvin Harrison went down and grabbed his shoulder, and my heart just stopped this past Saturday in Indiana. He ends up with 2 catches. I'm talking about, I think he's the best player in college football. And can you imagine them losing him for a substantial amount of time? We all remember back to the semifinal game against Georgia. I mean, Georgia had the best defense in the country, Ken. They had no answer for him until they knocked him out of the game.
Right. He's a very talented ball player. And I don't disagree. I know he's at least probably the best wide receiver, if not the best player. But, that's where it gets into you. You lose a guy like Harrison that takes Ohio State down. And other teams lose key guys. It takes you down. So that's what injuries can play a big factor in a long season.
It didn't hurt him having a Hall of Fame dad to throw passes with him and how to run routes and all that, did it?
Right. That's for sure.
Most of us don't get that. You remember Burt Jones, probably from LSU, was having a discussion with some LSU fans. Okay, I think Burt Jones, one of the top 10 quarterbacks in SEC history. He just had all kind of shoulder injuries and shoulder problems. I'm talking with some LSU fans last week, and because they were talking about the great number 7, what an honor it is to wear the 7 jersey at LSU, and talking. Pat, they knew, some of these more recent guys, Patrick Peterson and some of those. I said, Burt Jones may be the best of all of the number 7s at LSU. You remember him. He was quite the football player, quite the passer.
He was. Burt Jones was a great ball player. He came out and was with the then Baltimore Colts. So, I thought Burt Jones was a great ball player. And, I remember in my mind, he kind of put LSU to the next level of, that time. And for them not to remember him, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, they're LSU fans. Now, granted, they're 40, 45 years old, but they can do a little research. Right. I mean, like he faced off against Stabler in that Christmas Eve game, AFC, divisional playoff game. It was the goes to the post game to Dave Casper and went overtime, and the Raiders, got out of Baltimore. Right. But that was one of those seesaw games that you sometimes can catch replays of as one of the NFL's greatest games.
Oh, absolutely! It was a great game, and he was a great ball player, and and he was. I know to LSU fans younger, Joe Burrow is their great quarterback, but Burt Jones was outstanding.
Yeah, I completely agree. I gave you a list of a few games to study and for us to talk about. I'm going to start. These are not the picks that I've got that I'm giving away for my point spread. These are just games that I wanted to talk with you. I'm starting with Texas and Alabama. I know Bama is the favorite here, and deservedly so. But there's a lot of hurt feelings in that Texas locker room that they get criticized for their defense, and I believe their defense is a little bit better. And there's hurt feelings too, Ken, from the fact that last year they felt like they were about to beat Bama, and they had the quarterback Quinn Ewers where they lost him to injury and all. They're coming in with a chip on their shoulder. Is that all just, it's great that I just threw all that out there, but it doesn't matter because they're going to Tuscaloosa and they're facing Saban in Alabama?
I think you definitely have to put Alabama as a favorite in Alabama. I'm still not sold on Texas. I still question their physicality. If Bama's going to line up and smash and pound the ball down your throat. I don't know if Texas can really handle that type of style right now. What I find more interesting than anything is all the attention paid to where the fans are sitting, where the band's going to sit. They're going to force the band to sit in the upper level. I
I'm
mean,
pointing to the
that's
upper
gotten
deck.
so much attention. Yes. That's hilarious. I just think this gamesmanship is unbelievable. Obviously, when Texas is in the SEC, Bama can't do that. But right now, I like that little stab that they're doing to Texas, and that way, at least Texas band will be motivated. By golly.
Well, that's an excellent point about the motivation there. I mentioned that I went 4-0 against the spread last week. That's going to be my first selection. I'm going to take Texas in 7 points. Give that to my viewers. Bama may win, but I think Texas plays good enough to cover that. And it could be one of those situations too, Ken, where it's something like 30-17 late, and Texas gets a touchdown, what we call a backdoor cover. But I do believe the Longhorns' offense is good enough to put up points. I have the same reservation that you have about, are they physical enough?
Right. And then that's what I'm thinking. And part of that goes back to me wondering, Texas high school football used to be such a dominant factor. Texas high school football is not as physical as it used to be. It was probably the first state where all the passing came into, and they're, 7-on-7 all year round. And this is just old school maybe, but I think all the schools in Texas have lacked some physicality. And I think Texas needs to get back to that if they're going to compete in the SEC next year, week in, week out.
I think that's an excellent point by you. I think there was a time where all these coaches looked for a quarterback from Texas. The Texas high school football is sensational through the air, through the passing game. So that's my first selection, Texas +7. I'll run down my other two before we discuss some more college ones that are college plays. I like Notre Dame -7.5, an awful lot against NC State. And I'll get your opinion on it, actually. My friends think that Notre Dame's overrated. As a Buckeye fan, I'm terrified of Notre Dame. I'm afraid Ohio State's going to lose to Notre Dame when they go there. Plus, the whole Freeman's going to bring so much energy being a former Buckeye player there. They gave Ohio State troubles in the opening game last year, and that was in Columbus. But I've got to see NC State beat me here. I just right now I don't think that's going to happen. I think Notre Dame will win by a couple of touchdowns. How do you see it?
I think Notre Dame will. I think Notre Dame's a good ball club. I haven't seen NC. Don't know much about NC State right now, but I don't think they've been at a level they were years ago. But I expect Notre Dame to go in and win that game.
Well, they do have the Virginia quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, and we've seen the difference that it's made in the Virginia program has really taken a beating, but they'll need a lot. The third one that I have is Missouri, and they're favored by about 21 over Middle Tennessee State, and that's my third and final of the 5 picks I'm given of the college games. Missouri played on Thursday night. I do believe in that whole give me a couple of extra days to prepare, and when you're home, I think that helps. And I think Missouri looked really good in the first half against the team from South Dakota, but they didn't play really well in the second half. I thought when the season started, the Las Vegas guys were saying the over-under on Missouri was 6.5, and I really like the over there because I like their coach. I like that staff they got. And ask any Georgia fan if they were worried last year when they were playing in Missouri in that game in Columbia. And if they tell you they weren't, they're lying because Missouri led it for 3.5 quarters.
Yeah, I think Missouri is a very well coached team. He did a great job at Appalachian State. Missouri, I think, is better probably than people give them credit for. It's a tough college to recruit to. You don't have a lot of in-state talent like you did in the old days out of St. Louis. But Missouri's well coached. I think they'll be a physical team. And I think Missouri will definitely handle Middle Tennessee.
I've got 3 more college games that I want you to analyze that aren't part of any of my 5 picks. My 3 college picks: Notre Dame -7.5, Texas +7, and Missouri -21. Auburn is going to California. Hugh Freeze had a great debut last week, but that was against Massachusetts. It's a little bit different story. Through the years, Cal's had a great defense. Their offense has actually come along here of late. and a long, long way for Auburn to go for this road game, playing at 10:30 at night. There'll be a big Auburn crowd there. Don't get me wrong. But is this a trap for Auburn? And do they quickly lose their first game under Freeze, or do they escape this with a victory?
You know, I think Auburn will win. I think one advantage they have too is, yes, Cal can go in and look at Liberty film to try to say, what does Hugh like to do? What's he doing? Maybe go back and get Ole Miss. But they've only got one game to analyze at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? What are their tendencies? What are they going to do? And that's more difficult than people think. You spend a lot of time in the off season analyzing film, putting those tendencies in the computer so you have an idea. It is a little more difficult in this situation for Cal. So I think Auburn will go out and win, but it is tough playing at 10:30 at night. That's a long trip. So I think Hugh Freeze will come away with his second victory.
I hope you're right. Iowa plays at Iowa State. Now, look, there's been all kind of allegations and deals going on, with the athletic programs at Iowa and Iowa State.
Right.
There's a ludicrous deal with Kirk Ferentz's son is to remain offensive coordinator. He's got to, I think, average 25 points a game. And this to me is just crazy. Just let these guys play football and let them prepare. Yeah, their offense wasn't that good last year, but don't compare them to their defense, because their defense had like 3 guys taken in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. Iowa State, he was hot commodity, for a while there with Iowa State. Now the Cyclones, just a couple of years later, look like a completely different team. And I don't know. This is why I said I wanted you to pick Iowa State, because I got no clue.
Yeah, it's a tough one with all the turmoil, with the gambling going on at Iowa State. You know how much of a distraction that is. Iowa, I thought the program would be better after this many years under coach. It isn't. I think Iowa will win, but I think both schools may be looking for different coaches next school year.
It makes complete sense. I will say this. I don't know if this is coincidence or what, but one of the 2 doctors I see just having me, normal checkup period time for me today. He's an Iowa graduate. So it's just kind of weird that on a day that we were talking Iowa State, I was at the doctor's office for a visit with an Iowa graduate when I'm sitting here in Alabama. Lastly, Texas A&M. Go ahead. What were you going to say? Were you saying something, Ken?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Lastly, in the college ranks, Texas A&M from the SEC goes to Miami. Back in the day, you just could not beat Miami in the Orange Bowl. This is a little bit different of a story. There is pressure, I'm sure, on Fisher after what happened last year. You're talking about a system is what I want to say at College Station, because they've got oil money like you cannot believe behind them. I don't see how he fails. He's recruited so well. I got to think that he's going to have his kids ready to play, but wanted to get your opinion there for the game in Miami.
I think Texas A&M will win. I'm curious about Miami. I thought they would be better than they were last year. I like their coach. He did a great job at Alabama. I think they both there at the same time, part of their time. So they have some familiarity with each other. I think, if Jimbo doesn't do it this year with as much money as those alumni have put into those kids, he'll be out. They can't afford to keep putting out that much money and getting results like they did last year. That's for sure. But I think Texas A&M will go down and win this game.
And I think when you take the Mike Norvell factor and what he's doing at Florida State, it took him just a little bit of time to turn around Florida State when Jimbo left there. I don't think that will help Jimbo's causes. Let's transition into the NFL. There's a 4th pick I want to give everybody, and you say that I am guilty of going with the heart here. The Houston Texans are 9.5-point underdogs at Baltimore, and I'm a C.J. Stroud guy. I'm a C.J. Stroud fan. Ken and I were texting all the way up to MLK Day is the day that he just declared to go pro. And I was like, Ken, since he's waited so long, is he going to give Buckeye Nation the gift of coming back? No, he didn't. I know it's hard for rookies. Bryce Young's going to be facing it. I mean, I know when they're under the microscope, but 9.5 points, Ken's a lot, and that's why that I think and I think the Texans are a little bit better than people realize. They went out and they got some good acquisitions too from that defensive side. I really like Jimmy Ward in that secondary. I just think the Texans are better than people believe, and even though they usually get creamed by Baltimore, they're going to be. I'm rooting for that real tight game on Sunday.
And that's what Baltimore's. I don't know if they've totally underachieved, in the past year or two, few years. I thought they'd be a much more dominant team than they have been, and I'm sure the Texans have gotten better. I haven't followed them much, but I do think Baltimore will win, but I don't think they're going to go out and win by a bunch. That's for sure.
Yeah, I just need a competitive game. And Mechie, who was at Alabama, is back. He missed basically last year with the injury when he got hurt the previous year. CJ's got some weapons, so they're probably not as good as the wide receiver room he had at Ohio State. When you think about like the likes of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Couple more NFL games. This is my last of my five. The Pittsburgh Steelers at home +2.5 against the 49ers. I think this is the best game of all the games on Sunday. And I do believe the Steelers, where they had a down season last year, I believe they recover. That's a great division. Baltimore, of course, part of that division. Cincinnati, Cleveland's good. Right. But I think the Steelers have a resurgence. And I think week one at home, 49ers may be the best team in the NFC, but it's never easy to win on the road, especially in week one when you got to go all the way across country.
Well, I agree. You get advantage, like you said, and it's week one. It's a long season in the NFL. They aren't going to put everything into it. They're more worried. 49ers are about winning their division, but I think the Steelers will be much better. I do expect the Steelers to win in Pittsburgh. So I agree with your pick.
There was a team that the 49ers, it might have been 1991. It's either 91 or 92, but I believe it's 91. They started out like 2-4. They're 3 or 4 games out of first at one time, and they catch fire. They end up missing the playoffs, but just because of a tiebreaker situation. It was Montana was out hurt the whole season. It's when Steve Young really got the keys to the Cadillac. I'm telling you, you can afford an early loss. It's like Aaron Rodgers says, people don't panic if you're 1-2 early on in the season. It's like you just said, it's a long season.
It is, and that's what people don't realize. It is a very long season. Everyone's looking to peak toward the end, not at the beginning. It's just so many months of it. People have got to realize that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how you start, it's how you finish for sure. Final game that I want you to analyze for me is the Panthers and the Falcons, where you are. That's a big game in that area, and there's anticipation because that division, there's really no stellar team. If somebody put a gun up against my head, I might say the Saints would be the team to beat in the division. But the division's there; it's open for Atlanta to potentially win that division. When you win that division, you're talking about hosting a playoff game. How do you see that, Bryce Young, with his debut with the Panthers playing Atlanta?
That's what's interesting is Bryce Young coming back to Atlanta, and it gives the fans one more reason to boo him even more in Atlanta. The Falcons are going to have to prove to me a lot, but then again, so do the Panthers. This is a game, once again, where people can have to be patient if everything's not clicking right away with both teams. I don't think either team is anywhere near even a middle of the road team, but once again, the Falcons are at home, so you have to give them a little advantage playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just to review, people, I gave out 5 picks, 4-0 against the spread last week. This week I'm going with, in 3 colleges, Notre Dame -7.5, Missouri -21, and then it's all dogs after that. Texas +7 in that game that so many people are so excited for in Tuscaloosa. And then on Sunday, Hart play with the Texans +9.5, and then the Steelers, which Ken and I see the same way, plus 2.5. I have you analyze Monday Night Football since people are going to be into this Monday Night Football game. Are you buying into the Jets with Rodgers, or is Buffalo still the team to beat? And it could be a situation where whoever loses this game wins that division. We said all night, long season and all. I really want Rodgers to do well in New York. I've always liked the guy. But I think Buffalo might still have a little too much, but it would be really cool to see him win his debut there.
Yeah, I think Buffalo's the better team by far. Definitely the better team. I'm not sure if Aaron Rodgers, all he brings is necessarily what the Jets need right now in terms of all the media attention and all the hype that goes with it. But I think the Bills are a much, much better team than the Jets. But it will be a fun game to watch, especially on 9/11, having those New York teams playing in that game that day.
And it'll be a ratings bonanza as well.
Oh, correct.
Ken, I want to thank you for coming in and doing season 14, talking with Tony with me. And I would love to have you back as the football season continues.
Sure. Would love to do that and see how everything's going. And we can talk and see who else has changed what conference for the next year. I don't think they're done moving around yet.
Like my guest John Ferguson said last week, nothing screams ACC like Stanford, California.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for Talking with Tony. My thanks to Jake Barton, our producer, and Ken Kesselring, our guest. They were both in Newnan, Georgia tonight. I'm Tony Jones in Auburn, Alabama. We'll see you next time right here on Talking with Tony.